His hands were trembling. I could see it from the doorway, the way Richard's fingers shook as he held that single sheet of paper. The official letterhead caught the fluorescent light. Parker Holdings, LLC. He read it once, twice. His face drained of color, that confident, self-assured face I had looked at across the breakfast table for 32 years. The letter was simple, professional, devastating. Notice of non-renewal of commercial lease. 60 days to vacate the premises. And at the bottom, the signature of the property owner. He looked up, and our eyes met. I watched him read the name again, watched the recognition dawn, watched his entire world shift on its axis. Evelyn M. Parker, his ex-wife, the woman he had thrown away like yesterday's newspaper. I stood in that doorway, calm as a summer morning, and I spoke 5 words. You said you wanted everything. I only kept one thing. Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in 32 years, my husband had no words, no explanations, no demands, just silence and the sound of his empire beginning to crack. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand how we got here, you need to go back 6 months. Back to the night my husband of 32 years sat me down at our kitchen table and told me I was worth nothing. My name is Evelyn Marie Parker. I am 58 years old, and until 6 months ago, I lived in a beautiful house in Myers Park, Charlotte, North Carolina. I was married to Richard Allen Parker, a successful independent contractor in commercial real estate. He built his business from a small renovation company into a mid-sized commercial contractor with a reputation that opened doors all over the city. Richard was respected, confident, always the one giving speeches at industry dinners, shaking hands with developers, closing deals that made the local business journals. And me, I was Richard's wife. That was how people introduced me. That was how I introduced myself. Richard's wife. The woman in the background. The silent partner nobody counted. What they did not see was the truth. For the first 15 years of our marriage, I did the books for Richard's company. Every invoice, every payment, every tax filing passed through my hands. I managed client relationships, scheduled contractors, negotiated with vendors when suppliers tried to overcharge. I raised our 2 children while running the back office of a growing business. I did not have a title. I did not have a salary. My name was not on the business registration, not on the house deed, not on the car titles. Nothing. I was invisible in every way that mattered legally, and I had allowed it to happen. Our friends assumed I was taken care of. Our family assumed Richard was the provider, and I was the grateful recipient. Even our own children grew up seeing their father as the success story, and their mother as the supporting character. For 32 years, I let them believe it. I let everyone believe I was nothing without him. And maybe, for a long time, I believed it too. The house in Myers Park was Richard's pride. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a manicured lawn he paid someone else to maintain. I had chosen every paint color, every piece of furniture, every curtain that hung in those windows. I had made that house a home for 3 decades. But the deed was in Richard's name alone. I never asked why. Looking back, I should have asked much sooner. Our daily life had become a routine so familiar it was almost invisible. Morning coffee, Richard reading the news on his tablet, both of us moving around each other like furniture. We did not fight, we did not laugh, we simply coexisted. I cannot remember when we stopped really talking. Somewhere between the children leaving for college and the business doubling in size, the marriage became a transaction. Polite, functional, empty. I noticed the small things first. Richard started coming home later than usual. Business meetings, he said. Necessary dinners. The explanations were reasonable, and I wanted to believe them. Then the cologne changed. Something sharp and modern that I did not recognize. His phone lived face down on every surface, and he started going to the gym 3 mornings a week. In 32 years, I had never known Richard to exercise voluntarily. He began criticizing small things. The dinner was not what he wanted. The house felt cluttered. I did not understand his stress anymore, he said, like I had forgotten how to be a proper wife. He talked about new directions, fresh starts, the next chapter of his life. He stopped inviting me to business dinners. My mother used to say that a woman who panics loses, but a woman who waits wins. So I waited. I watched. I listened. One evening I heard him on the phone in his home office. His voice was low, the door almost closed. I stood in the hallway, silent as a ghost, and caught fragments of the conversation. She will not fight. She has nothing. It will be easy. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. I simply filed the information away and kept walking. Easy, he thought. He believed it would be easy. That night, Richard went to bed early. I sat alone in the living room, the house quiet around me. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm, heavy and waiting. I walked to the small desk in the corner, the one piece of furniture Richard never touched because it was mine. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a folder, worn at the edges from years of handling. I pulled it out and looked at the documents inside. Official papers. A business registration. The name printed at the top was Parker Holdings, LLC, established 5 years ago. Sole owner and manager, Evelyn Marie Parker. Richard had never asked what I did with my mother's inheritance. He assumed I was too simple, too dependent, too invisible to do anything that mattered. He never bothered to ask. I traced the name of the property listed in those documents. A commercial building on South Tryon Street. 3 floors, ground level leased to a local construction company. Parker Construction Services, Richard's company, his office, his warehouse, his entire operation sitting on land controlled by a company he knew nothing about. He wanted everything. He had said it himself on that phone call. But everything was not his to take. I closed the drawer, turned off the light, and went to bed. Tomorrow I knew everything would change. But tonight, I let him sleep peacefully. He had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The evening started like any other Tuesday. Late October, golden hour light spilling through the kitchen windows, autumn leaves visible on the trees outside. I was making pot roast. Richard's favorite, not because I particularly wanted to make it, but because Tuesday was pot roast day. It had been pot roast day for 32 years. Marriage becomes routine. Routine becomes invisible. And invisible was exactly what I had become. The kitchen was spotless, the way Richard preferred it. Clean counters, polished floors, fresh flowers on the table because I always kept fresh flowers on the table. Photographs lined the hallway walls. Our wedding day, faded and formal. The children's graduations, family vacations from years when we still took them together. Looking back, I realized the house already felt like a museum. We were preserving memories of people who no longer existed. Richard was late. Again, no text, no call, no explanation. I had stopped checking my phone for updates months ago. The pot roast simmered on the stove, filling the kitchen with the smell of rosemary and slow-cooked beef. I heard his car pull into the driveway around 6:30, and something in my stomach tightened. Strange how your body knows before your mind does. He walked in without greeting me. No hello, no kiss on the cheek, not even a nod in my direction. He set his briefcase down on the counter with unusual deliberateness, like he was placing a chess piece on a board. His face was set in that expression I knew too well, the one he wore when closing a difficult deal or firing an underperforming contractor. He looked at me the way he looked at properties he was about to demolish. "Sit down," he said. "We need to talk." I turned off the stove, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and sat across from him at the kitchen table. The same table where we had shared thousands of meals, celebrated birthdays, discussed the children's futures. The pot roast cooled on the counter, forgotten. Richard did not waste time on preamble. "I want a divorce." I sat very still. My hands rested flat on the table. I did not cry. I did not gasp. I simply watched him, waiting for whatever came next. He mistook my silence for shock and continued, his voice gaining confidence. "I have already talked to a lawyer, Harold Briggs. He is the best in Charlotte for this kind of thing. Harold Briggs. I knew the name. Everyone in Charlotte legal circles knew the name. Aggressive, expensive, specializing in protecting assets for high-net-worth clients during divorce proceedings. Richard had been planning this, researching, preparing. While I was making his dinners and scheduling his dentist appointments, he was building his exit strategy. He laid out his terms like a business proposal, bullet points delivered with the same efficiency he used in board meetings. I want the house, I want the cars, both of them. I want the business assets, obviously. That is my company. I want the investment accounts, the retirement funds. He paused, then added with what he clearly believed was generosity. You can keep your personal things. Clothes, jewelry, whatever. Personal things. 32 years of marriage reduced to clothes and whatever. I asked one question. Why now? Richard blinked. He had not expected a question. He had expected tears, perhaps, pleading. The reaction of a woman who had just been told her life was ending. Instead, I sat across from him, calm as stone, asking for clarification. I have given this a lot of thought, he said. It is time for both of us to move on. Move on. As if 32 years was a phase. As if I was a property he had outgrown, ready to be sold and replaced with something newer. I did not mention the late nights. I did not mention the new cologne or the gym membership or the way he guarded his phone like it contained state secrets. I did not mention the phone call I had overheard, the one where he said it would be easy because I had nothing to fight with. Let him think I was blindsided. Let him think I was weak. That was exactly what he needed to believe. Then he said the words that nearly broke my composure. I have already told the kids. My hands curled slightly on the table. You told them? Before telling me? Richard shrugged like it was nothing. I wanted them to hear it from me first. You know how emotional you can get. Emotional. The word men use when they want to dismiss a woman's legitimate anger. He explained that he had called Meredith that afternoon. Our daughter, 29 years old, living in Raleigh, always closer to her father than to me. According to Richard, she understood. She knew these things happen. He had already shaped the narrative, already made himself the reasonable one, the practical one. I was the emotional wife who would need to be managed. I will talk to Nathan tomorrow at the office, he continued. Man to man, he will understand. Business is business, man to man. As if I had not raised that boy. As if I had not sat with him through every fever, every heartbreak, every failure. As if 26 years of motherhood meant less than a single conversation in a corner office. Richard's phone buzzed on the table between us. He glanced at it, then back at me. I need to take this. He stood and walked into the other room, voice dropping to a murmur. But I had seen the screen before he grabbed it. A text message. The sender's name was just one letter. K, and next to it, a heart emoji. So that was her initial. Good to know. When he returned, he seemed calmer, almost cheerful. The phone call had pleased him. Where were we? Right, the logistics. He explained the timeline. Divorce filing next week. He expected minimal contest. If you cooperate, this can be done in 90 days. He offered me a settlement of $20,000. Enough to get started somewhere, he said, like he was giving me a head start in a race. He would even give me 60 days to find a new place to live. How generous. Harold says if you fight this, it gets ugly, Richard added, leaning forward. Expensive. And honestly, Evelyn, what is the point? Everything is in my name. The business is mine. The house is mine. You do not have anything to fight with. Nothing to fight with. That was what he believed. That was what everyone would believe. I nodded slowly. I understand. Richard smiled, relief washing over his features. Good. I knew you would be reasonable. He stood, announced he was staying at a hotel tonight to give me space, and went upstairs to pack an overnight bag. I sat at the kitchen table, pot roast cold on the counter, silence pressing down on the house like a weight. 32 years of marriage ended in a 15-minute conversation between the salt shaker and the butter dish. But I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt something I had not felt in years. Clarity. For 32 years, I had been patient. I had been invisible. I had been underestimated. And now, finally, that invisibility was going to be my greatest weapon. I stood and walked to my desk. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the folder I had looked at the night before. Parker Holdings LLC, the company Richard knew nothing about. The company that held the mortgage on his office building. The company that belonged entirely to me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I had not called in months. Daniel Whitmore, attorney at law. Old friend of my mother, specialist in estate and property law. The man who had helped me purchase that mortgage note 5 years ago when no one was watching. I typed a text message. Daniel, I need to see you. It is time. I pressed send and looked out the window at the dark street. Somewhere out there, Richard was driving to a hotel, probably calling the woman whose initial was K, celebrating the easy divorce he was about to win. He thought he was ending our marriage. He had no idea he was starting a war he had already lost. The morning after became a week. The week became 2. Richard returned from the hotel after a couple of days, but nothing was the same. He moved through the house like he already owned it alone, like I was a piece of furniture he had not yet gotten around to removing. I was now a guest in my own home. His first request came wrapped in false consideration. It is better for both of us if we have separate spaces. Less awkward. He gestured toward the guest room down the hall, the room I had decorated for visitors. Pale blue walls, floral bedding, a small window overlooking the backyard. For 32 years, I had slept in the master bedroom. Now I was being relocated to a room meant for people who did not belong. I moved my clothes without argument, carried them down the hall in quiet armfuls while Richard watched television in the living room. He did not offer to help. He did not acknowledge what was happening. To him, it was already done. I was already gone. The daily erasure began immediately. My reading chair disappeared from the living room, relocated to the basement without discussion. My tea collection was pushed to the back of the kitchen cabinet to make room for a new coffee maker I had never seen before. Family photographs that included me were turned face down or moved to less visible locations. Richard was editing me out of the house before I had even left, practicing what his new life would look like without me in it. One afternoon, while doing laundry because apparently that was still my responsibility, I found a receipt in Richard's jacket pocket. La Belle Étoile. The most expensive French restaurant in Charlotte. Dinner for two, $347. The date on the receipt was the same night he had told me he wanted a divorce. He had celebrated. The same evening he ended our marriage, he took someone to dinner and raised a glass to his freedom. The pattern emerged quickly once I knew what to look for. Richard's late meetings increased to 4-5 nights a week. He started going to the gym every morning, something he had never done in 32 years of marriage. New clothes appeared in his closet, slimmer fits and younger styles that looked ridiculous on a 61-year-old man trying to recapture something he had never really had. The cologne was sharp and modern, nothing like the understated scent he had worn for decades. His phone became a fortress. Always face down, always on silent, passcode changed to something I did not know. He stepped outside to take calls, voice dropping to a murmur I could never quite hear. Once, standing in the kitchen, I heard him laugh. A genuine, delighted laugh, the kind I had not heard from him in over a decade. Whoever she was, she made him feel young again. Or at least she made him believe he could be. Men having affairs become predictable. They think they are being clever, but they follow the same script every time. I still had access to our household credit card account. Richard had not thought to remove me, probably assuming I was too broken to check. I reviewed the statements online one evening while he was out. Jewelry store, $800. Spa gift certificate, $350. A weekend at the Ballantine Hotel, $1,200. None of these purchases were for me. He was spending our money on her, and he did not even bother to hide it well. One statement entry caught my attention, a charge at a boutique downtown, with a note in the details field that had been auto-populated by the store. Gift wrap K. Holloway. There it was, the initial from his phone, now attached to a last name, Holloway. That evening, with Richard out for another late meeting, I opened my laptop and searched. Holloway plus Parker Construction. The LinkedIn result appeared immediately. Kristen Holloway, Senior Accountant at Parker Construction Services. 41 years old, MBA from UNC Charlotte, joined the company 3 years ago. Her profile photo showed blonde hair, a polished smile, confident eyes looking directly at the camera. 3 years. Richard had been working with her for 3 years. How long had it been more than work? I remembered her now. The company Christmas party 2 years ago. Richard had introduced her briefly, his hand on her elbow in a gesture I had dismissed as professional courtesy. "This is Kristen. She is doing great things with our books." I had shaken her hand, smiled politely, complimented her dress. The whole time she was already planning to take my husband. Or maybe he was already giving himself away. Kristen was not just younger than me, though she was. She was not just attractive, though she was that too. Kristen represented everything I was not supposed to be. Career-focused, independent, visible. Richard did not want a wife anymore. He wanted a trophy that came with a business degree. The professional betrayal stung almost as much as the personal one. I had helped Richard build that company. I had done the books myself for the first 15 years, trained the people who eventually replaced me. And now one of those people was replacing me in more ways than one. I gave him my labor, my years, my expertise. He used my own work to find someone new. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Nathan, Mom, can we talk?" "Not at Dad's office. Somewhere private. Something was wrong." I replied immediately. "Tomorrow. Coffee at the place on East Boulevard." The next morning I arrived early at a cafe far from Richard's usual territory. Nathan walked in looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his 26 years suddenly looking much older. He sat across from me and wrapped his hands around his coffee cup like he needed something to hold on to. "Mom, I need to tell you something. About Dad. About her." He had seen them together at the office. Not just professional interactions, lingering touches, private jokes, long lunches that had nothing to do with business. The whole office knew, but nobody said anything. Everyone was afraid of Richard. "I did not want to believe it," Nathan said, his voice cracking. "But I have seen them, Mom. Everyone has." His guilt was written across his face. He felt he had betrayed me by staying silent, caught between his job and his mother. "I should have told you sooner. I am sorry." I reached across the table and held his hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. You are not responsible for your father's choices." He looked at me with wet eyes. "Mom, there is more. Something about the finances. I have seen things on the books that do not add up." He could not say more without risking his job, but he wanted me to know. "If you need help, I am on your side. My son. My boy." In a family falling apart, at least one person had chosen me. That weekend, the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce held its annual dinner, an event Richard and I had attended together for 20 years. This year, he went alone. "Business only," he said. "No spouses." I did not argue. Sunday morning, scrolling through Facebook, I saw the photos. A friend's post from the event, a group shot with familiar faces. And in the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, Richard, standing close to a blonde woman in a red dress, his hand on her lower back, both of them smiling at something off camera. Kristen Holloway, looking like she already owned everything that used to be mine. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I screenshot the photo and saved it to a folder on my laptop. Evidence. Every moment, every photo, every receipt. Richard was building his new life in public, and I was building my case in private. I opened a new document on my laptop. Title, timeline. First entry, date of divorce announcement, dinner at La Belle Étoile with Kay Holloway. Richard thought he was being discreet. He had no idea I was documenting every step. When the time came, I would know exactly how long he had been lying, and exactly how much it would cost him. Daniel Whitmore's office was nothing like Harold Briggs's downtown tower. No marble floors, no intimidating reception desk, No young associates in expensive suits rushing between conference rooms. Daniel worked out of a modest building on North Tryon Street, the kind of place that looked like it had been there for 50 years, because it had. Comfortable furniture, diplomas on wood-paneled walls, and the smell of old books and coffee. This was where my mother had come when she needed legal advice. This was where she had sent me when I needed to protect myself. Daniel greeted me at the door with a warm handshake. 71 years old, silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Margaret's daughter," he said. "I was wondering when you would call." He had known my mother for 40 years. He had handled her estate when she passed, and he had helped me, quietly and without questions, when I came to him 5 years ago with a plan I could not explain to anyone else. "Your mother always said you were the smart one," Daniel continued as he led me to his office. "She said you would know when the time was right." I sat across from him, the folder from my desk drawer in my hands. "Richard wants a divorce. He wants everything. And I need you to help me give it to him." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Give it to him?" I nodded. "Give him everything he thinks he wants. But first, I need to tell you about what my mother left me and what I did with it. To understand what happened next, you need to understand where it all started. 8 years ago, when my mother died and left me the only inheritance that ever mattered. My mother, Margaret Ellis, passed away at 81. She had been a widow for 20 years, fiercely independent until her last breath. She worked as a bookkeeper for a manufacturing company until she was 70, and she lived in a small house in Gastonia, North Carolina, that she kept immaculate on a modest budget. She never asked anyone for anything. She never owed anyone a dime. The funeral was small. Old friends from church, a few distant relatives, neighbors who remembered her from decades of community involvement. Richard attended, though he seemed impatient throughout the service. I caught him checking his phone twice during the eulogy. I sat in the front pew holding my mother's handkerchief, remembering the last thing she had said to me. "Evelyn, a woman who depends entirely on a man, is a woman waiting to fall." 1 week after the funeral, Daniel Whitmore called me to his office for the reading of the will. I expected very little. My mother had lived simply. The house in Gastonia was modest, worth maybe $60,000 after repairs. Personal effects, photographs, her grandmother's china. Nothing that would change anyone's life. Then Daniel told me about the savings account. My mother had never mentioned it, not once in 81 years. A savings account she had maintained since her 20s. Contributions made quietly every month for over 50 years. The balance was $380,000. I could not speak. "Mama saved that much?" Daniel smiled gently. 50 years of careful saving. She never touched it. She always said it was for you, for when you needed it most. Attached to the will was a handwritten letter in my mother's careful script. Daniel handed it to me privately, and I read it 3 times before I could fully absorb the words. "My dear Evelyn," the letter began. "I have watched you give everything to your marriage. Your time, your work, your dreams. I pray I am wrong about Richard. But if I am right, this money is your safety net. Do not tell him about it. Do not share it. Keep something that is only yours. A woman with nothing of her own is a woman with no choices. I love you, Mama." She had seen what I refused to see. Years before I admitted it to myself, my mother had known. That evening, Richard asked about the inheritance. "Anything useful in the will?" "I know your mother was not wealthy, but every bit helps." I made a choice in that moment. The first deliberate lie I had ever told my husband. "Just the house," I said. "It will need repairs before we can sell it. Maybe $40,000 after costs?" Richard shrugged. "Better than nothing, I guess." He never asked again. My mother's money became invisible, just like me. The following week I drove to a bank in Gastonia. Not Charlotte, where Richard might hear about it. I opened an account in my maiden name, Evelyn Marie Ellis, and deposited the full $380,000. I told no one. Not Richard, not the children, not my closest friends. For 2 years the money sat untouched, I thought about it constantly. What would I do with it? Save it for emergencies? Invest it in something safe? Let it grow while I waited for a future I could not yet imagine? Richard never asked about my mother's estate after that first conversation. The house in Gastonia sold, and he assumed that was the end of it. He forgot about my mother's money the same way he forgot about my mother. And me. I started reading. Financial books, investment guides, real estate basics. I attended a free seminar on commercial property investment at the community college, sitting in the back row taking notes like a student half my age. I discovered something surprising. I understood numbers. I had done Richard's books for 15 years. I knew more about money than I had ever given myself credit for. He just never bothered to notice. 6 years ago, an idea began to take shape. What if I did not just save the money? What if I used it to build something of my own? Something Richard could never touch, never claim, never even know about. Mama told me to keep something for myself. I decided to keep more than money. I decided to keep power. 5 years ago, I filed paperwork for a limited liability company. Parker Holdings, LLC, registered in North Carolina, sole member and manager, Evelyn Marie Parker. The business address was a post office box in Gastonia, nowhere near Charlotte. Richard's name appeared nowhere in the documents. I used his name for the company as a small irony. Everything he thought was his would eventually answer to something called Parker, just not the Parker he expected. I spent months studying the Charlotte commercial real estate market. I learned about mortgage notes, property liens, distressed assets. And I discovered something interesting about a building on South Tryon Street. A mid-sized commercial property, 3 floors, owned by an elderly investor who had recently passed away. His estate was struggling to manage the property. The mortgage was still outstanding, held by a regional bank looking to recover their investment. And the ground floor? Leased to a construction company, Parker Construction Services, Richard's company. He had been a tenant there for 12 years. The building Richard worked in every day was vulnerable, and I had the money to do something about it. Through Daniel's guidance, I made an offer. Not to buy the building outright, but to purchase the mortgage note, $350,000, almost all of my inheritance. The bank accepted. What this meant was simple but powerful. I now held the debt on the building. If the building was ever sold, I would be paid first. More importantly, I had influence over the property. I reviewed Richard's lease agreement for the office space. A standard commercial lease renewed every 5 years. The clause that mattered was buried in the fine print. Upon change of ownership or mortgage holder, the lease may be subject to review and non-renewal at the discretion of the new controlling party. Richard had never read it. He signed his vulnerability without knowing. Back in Daniel's office, I finished explaining. He sat back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Margaret would be proud. Hell, I am proud. He reviewed the documents I had brought. The LLC paperwork, the mortgage note, the lease terms. His assessment was exactly what I needed to hear. Richard has no idea you own this. It is completely separate from your marital assets. Inheritance used for separate investment, courts will not touch it. The strategy was clear. Let Richard have everything he was asking for in the divorce. The house, the cars, the business assets. I would take a modest settlement and walk away. Richard would celebrate his victory. Then, 2 weeks later, Parker Holdings LLC would send a notice. Lease not renewed. As I left his office, Daniel called after me. Evelyn. One question. When Richard finds out, and he will, what do you want to happen? I turned to face him. I want him to know it was me. I want him to understand that the woman he threw away was the one holding the keys all along. Mama always said a woman who waits wins. I had waited 8 years. Now it was almost time to collect. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to the house while Richard was at work. Official legal letterhead, thick cream-colored paper, the kind that cost money just to look at. Return address, Briggs, Caldwell and Associates. Richard's attack dog had finally put his threats in writing. I signed for the delivery and sat at the kitchen table to read. The formal divorce petition had been filed in Mecklenburg County. Grounds, irreconcilable differences. Standard language, nothing surprising. But the attached demands were anything but standard. Full ownership of the marital residence at 1847 Rosewood Lane. Both vehicles, the Mercedes and the Lexus. All business assets and accounts related to Parker Construction Services. Investment accounts, retirement funds. Everything accumulated over 32 years of marriage. And the proposed settlement to me? The woman who had helped build every bit of it? $15,000? $15,000. 32 years of marriage valued at less than a used car. A personal letter from Harold Briggs was attached to the petition. The language was polite, the subtext threatening. We encourage you to accept this generous settlement without prolonged litigation. Mr. Parker's assets are well documented and protected. Any attempt to claim beyond the proposed amount will be met with vigorous defense. We trust you will make the reasonable choice. Generous, reasonable. Words men use when they want women to disappear quietly. I drove to Daniel's office that afternoon, the petition folder under my arm. He read through every page, his expression darkening with each demand. When he finished, he set the papers down and looked at me with concern. Harold Briggs. Of course Richard hired him. Daniel explained what we were facing. Harold would demand extensive financial discovery, subpoenaing bank records, business documents, tax returns from the past decade. He would try to establish that I had contributed nothing of financial value to the marriage, that Richard had built everything alone. Standard playbook for wealthy husbands trying to minimize what their wives could claim. He is going to make you look like you were just along for the ride, Daniel warned. He outlined what a normal response would look like. File counterclaims for equitable distribution. Argue for half of all marital assets. Subpoena Richard's business records. Fight for alimony based on 32 years of unpaid labor building his company. You could win 40, maybe 50%, Daniel said. It would take 2 years and cost a fortune, but you could fight. I listened to all of it. Then I shook my head. No, we are not fighting. Daniel stared at me. Evelyn, if you do not fight, you will lose everything. I will lose everything that is in my name, I said calmly. But Daniel, nothing valuable is in my name. That is the whole point. I reminded him of what we both knew. The house, the cars, the business, they were all marital property, all in Richard's name. But the building mortgage, my separate property purchased with inheritance funds, was completely untouchable in the divorce. It belonged to Parker Holdings LLC, and Parker Holdings belonged to me. Let Harold win, I told him. Let Richard take it all, and then let him discover what all is actually worth. Daniel paused, considering something. There is one thing I need to know. Richard's business? Is it actually profitable? I hesitated. I had not done his books in years. But Nathan said something about the finances not adding up. If there is debt we do not know about, Daniel said slowly, it could complicate things, or it could make things much simpler. That evening, I remembered the USB drive Nathan had given me at the coffee shop. I had been so focused on the Kristen situation that I had not looked at it yet. With Richard out late, presumably with his mistress, I opened my laptop and inserted the drive. The contents were damning. Copies of financial documents from Parker Construction, profit and loss statements from the last 3 years, bank account summaries, and a folder labeled Questions. Nathan had scanned a handwritten note inside. Mom, I am not an accountant, but something is wrong. Please look. On the surface, the company appeared healthy. Revenue was up, projects were being completed, invoices were getting paid, but the expenses told a different story. Equipment purchases that seemed inflated beyond any reasonable cost. Consulting fees paid to companies I had never heard of. Cash withdrawals with vague descriptions like miscellaneous and operational expenses. A line of credit drawn to 80% of its capacity. I had done these books for 15 years. I knew what healthy finances looked like. This was not healthy. This was bleeding. Digging deeper, I found what Nathan had sensed but could not articulate. The company had been operating at a loss for the past 18 months. Richard had been covering the shortfalls with credit, not profit. Every quarter, he borrowed more to make it look like the business was still growing. There were payments to something called Tryon Ventures LLC, amounts ranging from $10,000 to $50,000, with no clear service provided in return. And buried in the bank statements, I found a second mortgage on the commercial property where Richard rented his office, the building I owned the note on. He had borrowed against it 2 years ago without my knowledge. Richard was not just cheating on me, he was running the business into the ground, and he thought he was hiding it. I searched Tryon Ventures LLC in the North Carolina Business Registry. The registered address was a post office box in Charlotte. The registered agent was a name I recognized immediately, Kristen M. Holloway. He was not just sleeping with his accountant, he was funneling company money to her through a shell company. Every consulting fee paid to Tryon Ventures was money going directly into his mistress's pocket. The next morning, I called Daniel with everything I had found. I read him the figures, the suspicious payments, the Kristen connection. He let out a low whistle when I finished. "Evelyn, do you understand what this means?" The company was not an asset. It was a liability. If Richard took full ownership in the divorce, he took full responsibility for every debt, every defaulted loan, every dollar owed to creditors. The business accounts, the line of credit, the second mortgage on the building, they would all be his problem. Harold Briggs's aggressive petition was not a list of victories. It was a list of liabilities disguised as assets. He is demanding everything because he thinks everything is worth something, Daniel said. But he is actually demanding to inherit a sinking ship. Richard always said I did not understand business. He never realized I understood it better than he did. Daniel revised our strategy. Agree to everything Richard demanded, quickly, without negotiation. Do not request financial discovery. Let him think I knew nothing about the company's true condition. Take the minimal settlement and walk away clean. Let him discover the debt after the divorce was final. The less you fight, Daniel explained, the faster he signs. The faster he signs, the more he is trapped. That evening, I called Nathan. I needed him safe before everything collapsed. "Sweetheart, I need you to do something for me." I asked him to start looking for another job quietly, without telling Richard. "You have done enough. I do not want you caught in the middle when this falls apart." Nathan understood immediately. "How bad is it, Mom? Bad enough that I need you safe before anyone else finds out." He agreed to start searching. He had contacts at other construction firms, and his skills were valuable. His reputation was separate from his father's, at least for now. "Mom, are you going to be okay?" I smiled even though he could not see it. "I am going to be better than okay, I promise." After hanging up, I sat alone in the guest room. The house was quiet. Richard out with Kristen again, celebrating a victory he did not yet know was hollow. I looked at the USB drive in my hand, then at the folder from Daniel on my nightstand. Richard thought he was taking everything from me, but everything he wanted was rotten at the core. He just did not know it yet. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Title: Exit Strategy, Phase 2. In 6 weeks, the divorce would be final. In 8 weeks, Richard would lose his office. In 10 weeks, he would understand what it meant to have nothing. And I would be free. The phone rang on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks into the divorce process. I was in the guest room sorting through old photographs I had pulled from a box in the closet. Pictures of the children when they were small. Birthday parties, school plays, summer vacations. Memories from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. When I saw Meredith's name on the screen, my heart lifted for just a moment. My daughter, finally calling. It took her 3 weeks to reach out to her mother. 3 weeks of silence while I moved into the guest room, watched my husband parade his mistress through my kitchen, and had my belongings inventoried by his lawyer. But she was calling now. That had to mean something. I answered with hope in my voice. "Meredith, I am so glad you called." Her tone stopped me cold. Careful, rehearsed. No warmth, no concern for how I was doing. Mom, I think we need to talk about what is happening. She sounded like she was reading from a script. I wondered who had written it. Richard's version of events came pouring out. According to my daughter, the marriage had been dead for years. I was emotionally distant, unsupportive. I had refused to change despite Richard trying everything to make it work. The divorce was sad but necessary for everyone's happiness. Dad said you two grew apart, Meredith explained, that it happens sometimes. He said you would understand if I stayed neutral. Neutral. The word children use when they have already chosen a side. Her voice shifted, growing harder. Mom, Dad told me you are not even fighting for the house, that you are just giving up. She paused. He said you must have known this was coming and did not care enough to try. The accusation hung between us. I was the problem. I had failed. Richard had already shaped the narrative, and Meredith had accepted it without question. Your father told you his version, I said carefully. That does not make it the truth. There was silence on the line. Then Meredith asked a question that nearly broke my resolve. Mom, is there something you are not telling me? For a moment I considered telling her everything. The affair, the money, the building, the plan I had been executing for 5 years. But I held back. Meredith was not ready to hear the truth. She was still living in her father's story, believing the version of reality he had constructed for her. When this is over, I said, we will talk, I promise. Meredith sighed. I hope you know what you are doing, Mom. So do I. After hanging up, I sat with the weight of that conversation for a long time. Meredith had always been Richard's daughter. From the time she was small, she craved his approval, his attention, his praise. I remembered her at dance recitals, scanning the audience for her father's face. Report cards brought to Dad first. The decision to attend Richard's alma mater for college. Every major choice filtered through the question of what would make him proud. Richard had cultivated this, whether consciously or not. He was the exciting parent, the one with business trips to interesting cities, important phone calls that could not be interrupted, the promise of success that seemed to follow him everywhere. I was the daily parent, homework help, doctor's appointments, the one who sat up with her when she had nightmares or heartaches. I was the foundation. Richard was the fireworks. And children remember fireworks. Nathan had been different. By high school, he had started to see through the performance. He once told me, at 16, Mom, Dad takes credit for everything you do. It is not fair. I told him life was not always fair. What I did not tell him was that I was keeping score. One daughter who believed the surface. One son who looked beneath it. I could not force Meredith to see the truth. But I could make sure Nathan was protected when everything fell apart. Tuesday brought another visitor I had not invited. The doorbell rang mid-morning, and I opened it to find Gloria Parker standing on my porch. Richard's mother. 79 years old, silver hair perfectly styled, pearl earrings catching the autumn light. She had not called ahead. Gloria never did. She believed surprise visits gave her the upper hand. She was usually right. I let her in and offered tea. She declined, sitting on the edge of the living room sofa as if afraid the furniture might contaminate her. Her eyes moved around the room with thinly veiled assessment, cataloging everything she saw. I see you are still here, she said. Richard mentioned you would be finding your own place soon. The divorce is not final yet. I have every right to be here. Gloria launched into what was clearly a prepared speech. Evelyn, I have known you for 32 years. I want what is best for everyone. Richard has worked so hard to build his success. It would be a shame if this divorce became messy. I hope you will do the right thing and let him keep what he has earned. The subtext was clear. Do not fight. Do not cause trouble. Disappear quietly and let Richard have everything. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. Between us, dear, I have always thought you aimed a bit above your station when you married Richard. Your mother was a lovely woman, but simple. Richard needed someone with more ambition, more drive. Perhaps this is for the best. You can find someone more suited to your level. She had insulted my mother, my dead mother, in my own home. I set down my teacup with deliberate calm. Gloria, thank you for your concern. I will consider your advice. I stood, a clear signal that this conversation was over. I am sure you have other places to be. Gloria blinked, surprised by the dismissal. She was not accustomed to being shown the door. I walked her to the entrance, my hand on the doorknob. Please give my regards to Richard. Tell him I will see him in court. She left flustered, which gave me more satisfaction than I should probably admit. At the threshold, she turned back with one final warning. Evelyn, I do not know what you think you are doing, but Richard always wins. Always. I watched her walk to her car, her heels clicking on the driveway. She had no idea that this time, Richard had already lost. 2 days later, I met Nathan at our usual cafe on East Boulevard. He arrived looking lighter than before, a spark of hope in his eyes that I had not seen in weeks. Mom, I got a call back. Henderson Construction in Raleigh, a mid-sized firm with a good reputation, growing steadily in the commercial market. They wanted him for a project management role. The salary was slightly less than what Richard paid, but there was room to grow, independence, a future separate from his father's crumbling empire. If they make an offer, I am taking it, Nathan said. I cannot stay with Dad anymore, not after what I have seen. He shared what he had observed at the office. Kristen was practically running things now. She attended meetings Richard used to handle alone, made decisions without consulting anyone, moved through the company like she already owned it. Employees whispered about the new management. The atmosphere had become tense, uncertain. Dad is checked out, Nathan said quietly. It is like he is already planning his next life, and forgot that the current one is still burning down. I reached across the table and held my son's hand. I am proud of you, for seeing the truth, for choosing your own path. His eyes grew wet. I am sorry I did not say something sooner, about Kristen, about everything. You said something when it mattered. That is all that counts. As we stood to leave, Nathan hesitated. Mom, one more thing. Grandma Gloria came by the office yesterday. She was asking Dad about your finances, what you might be hiding. His concern was genuine. She is looking for something. Be careful. I smiled. Let her look. She will not find what she does not know exists. That night, Richard came home after midnight. I heard him stumble through the door, heard Kristen's laughter in the driveway before her car pulled away. I stayed in the guest room, lights off, listening to him move through the house that would soon be only his. I counted my losses. Daughter aligned with Richard. Mother-in-law openly hostile. Husband a stranger. Home on borrowed time. Friends with unknown loyalties. Then I counted my assets. Son who stood beside me. Lawyer ready for battle. Building that belonged to me. Strategy already in motion. My phone buzzed. An email from Daniel. Subject line. Court date confirmed. 6 weeks from today. 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, this would be over. In 6 weeks, I would walk away from this house, this marriage, this version of myself. They thought I was alone. Gloria thought I was beaten. Meredith thought I was giving up. Richard thought I was irrelevant. But alone is not the same as weak, and quiet is not the same as defeated. I typed a reply to Daniel. I will be ready. The family I had built was crumbling around me. But I had stopped trying to hold it together. Instead, I was building something new. Something they could not see, could not touch, could not take. And when the dust settled, I would still be standing. Sandra Mitchell had been my closest friend for 25 years. We met at a PTA meeting when our children were in elementary school, bonded over terrible coffee and shared exhaustion, and built a friendship that survived everything life threw at us. Book clubs on Wednesday nights, holiday dinners with our families, weekend brunches where we solved each other's problems over eggs and mimosas. Sandra knew things about me that Richard had never bothered to learn. If you had asked me a month ago who I trusted most in the world besides my children, I would have said Sandra without hesitation. She had been calling every few days since the divorce announcement. Always sympathetic, always concerned. "How are you holding up? What do you need? I am here for you." The words felt like a lifeline. Sandra was solid ground in the middle of an earthquake, or so I believed. 4 weeks into the divorce process, Sandra came to visit. Richard was at work or with Kristen. The distinction no longer mattered. She arrived with homemade cookies and a bottle of wine, the gesture so familiar it almost made me cry. "You need a friend right now," she said, settling onto my couch. "Let's talk." The conversation started normally. How was I feeling? What were my plans? Was I sleeping enough? The questions of a concerned friend checking on someone going through the worst experience of her life. Then the questions shifted. Do you have a lawyer yet? Who is it? What is Richard offering in the settlement? Do you have any savings of your own? Anything separate from the joint accounts? And then, delivered with careful casualness, what about that inheritance from your mother? Did you ever invest that? The questions came too fast, too specific. Sandra was not asking as a friend, she was asking as an investigator. I paused mid-conversation, something cold settled in my chest. I decided to test my suspicion. "Actually," I said carefully, "I have been thinking about fighting for half the business. Daniel thinks I have a strong case." Sandra's eyes widened slightly. Interest, not concern. "Really? That seems aggressive. What would you even do with a construction company?" Her tone was wrong. Discouraging, almost warning. A real friend would have said good for you or fight for what you deserve. Sandra was trying to talk me out of it. She reached for her phone, glanced at the screen, then put it away. "Sorry, just checking on the kids." But I had seen the screen. A text thread was open. The name at the top, Richard P. My best friend, 25 years, and she was reporting to my husband. The betrayal hit me like ice water. For a moment I could not breathe. Sandra, who had held my hand through my mother's funeral. Sandra, who knew about my fears, my dreams, my insecurities. Sandra, who had apparently been sharing all of it with the man trying to destroy me. But I did not flinch. I did not confront her. Instead, I recalibrated. "You know what? You are right," I said, letting my voice soften. "Fighting seems exhausting. I will probably just take whatever Richard offers and move on." Sandra relaxed visibly. "That is so mature of you, Evelyn. Richard will appreciate that. Richard will appreciate that." She said the quiet part out loud. As she prepared to leave, I asked one more question. "Sandra, can I ask you something? Have you seen Richard lately? At any events or anything?" Her pause was a fraction too long. "No, not really. You know how busy everyone is." She was lying. I could see it in the way she would not meet my eyes. But what was she hiding beyond the obvious? 3 days after Sandra's visit, I was scrolling through Facebook, a habit I had tried to break, but isolation makes you desperate for connection, even the artificial kind. A photograph appeared in my feed, posted by our mutual friend Catherine Wells. "Wonderful evening celebrating Sandra's birthday. Love these people." The group photo showed 12 women I had known for years. Sandra in the center, beaming, surrounded by friends raising glasses of champagne. Every woman from our regular circle was there. Women I had known for decades, hosted in my own home, called when I needed advice. I was not in the photo. I had not been invited. I scrolled through the comments and tagged names. Confirmation of what I already knew. They had not forgotten to invite me. They had decided not to. Then I saw the second photo. Background of a group shot. Slightly out of focus, but unmistakable. Richard, standing near the bar in his best suit, laughing at something. And beside him, hand on his arm, matching his smile. Kristen Holloway in a red dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Sandra's birthday party. My husband and his mistress were there, and no one had told me. No one thought I deserved to know. I understood then what had happened. Richard had not just left the marriage, he had taken my friends with him. He was charming, successful, connected. I was the discarded wife, the inconvenient reminder of a life he wanted to forget. In every divorce, there are sides. I had naively believed our friends would stay neutral. I did not realize neutral meant choosing him. As I closed Facebook, a notification appeared. A private message from someone unexpected. Patricia Knowles, a woman from the outer edge of our social circle. Retired accountant, widowed 5 years ago, always kept to herself at gatherings. We had exchanged pleasantries over the years, but never had a real conversation. Her message was simple. Evelyn, I saw what happened at Sandra's party. I saw how Richard behaved. I saw the woman he was with. If you ever need someone to talk to, or someone to testify, I am here. Some of us have not forgotten who you really are. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed a reply. Can we meet? 2 days later, I sat across from Patricia in a quiet cafe in Dilworth, far from our usual neighborhood. She was 72, sharp-eyed, silver hair cut in a practical style. She looked like a woman who had survived things. I recognized the strength. Patricia explained what she had witnessed at Sandra's party. Richard arrived with Kristen openly, no pretense of discretion. Sandra greeted them warmly, introduced Kristen as Richard's partner like it was the most natural thing in the world. The other women whispered but said nothing. When Patricia asked about me, Sandra had smiled sympathetically and said I was going through a difficult time. They thought it was best not to invite me. Best not to invite you to watch your husband parade his mistress, Patricia said flatly, like they were protecting you by excluding you. She told me about her own history. Her late husband had been unfaithful. She discovered it after he died, going through his papers. Everyone had known except her. Years of pitying looks and careful silences, and she had been oblivious to all of it. I understand what it feels like to be the last to know, Patricia said, to be excluded and pitied while everyone else watches the show. She paused. I cannot change what they did, but I can stand with you. If you need a witness to Richard's behavior, I saw it. I will testify. Before leaving, she handed me a business card, the name of a forensic accountant she had worked with years ago. If Richard is hiding money, and men like him always are, this woman will find it. Patricia stood and gathered her coat. You are not alone, Evelyn, even when it feels like it. That evening I sat with my phone in my hand, Sandra's number on the screen. 25 years of friendship, thousands of conversations, decades of trust. All of it had been a lie, or at least it had become one. I typed a message. Sandra, I know. About the texts to Richard. About the party. About everything. Do not contact me again. I pressed send before I could reconsider. 3 dots appeared immediately. Sandra typing. Then they stopped. No response came. I went to Facebook. Unfriended Sandra Mitchell. Unfriended Catherine Wells. One by one, I removed the women who had chosen Richard's circus over my dignity. I was not angry. I was empty. And emptiness was easier to carry than betrayal. I opened my laptop and added new entries to my timeline document. Sandra Mitchell, confirmed informant for Richard. Birthday party Richard and Kristen attended publicly. Patricia Knowles, potential witness. Evidence, not emotion. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Quick question. Did Richard ever mention anything about a property in Blowing Rock? Mountain cabin purchased 3 years ago? My heart stopped. A cabin? 3 years ago? I knew nothing about this. I typed my reply. No. Tell me more. Every time I thought I knew the full extent of Richard's secrets, another door opened. A cabin I had never heard of, money I had never seen, a life he had been building without me for longer than I wanted to admit. But every secret he had hidden was another thread I could pull, and I intended to pull them all. The apartment was smaller than my closet in the old house. 750 square feet of clean lines and large windows perched on the 3rd floor of a modern building in South End, Charlotte. I stood in the doorway on my first morning there, coffee cup in hand, watching the city skyline catch the November light. It was the most beautiful place I had ever lived. 2 weeks had passed since the divorce was finalized. 2 weeks since I signed away everything Richard thought mattered and walked out of that courthouse into a future that belonged only to me. The settlement check had cleared. $20,000, deposited into an account that bore only my name. It was not much by most standards, but it was enough. First month's rent, security deposit, basic furniture that did not carry 32 years of memories in its fabric. The apartment had a living room with a small kitchen attached, 1 bedroom for sleeping, and a tiny second room I was turning into an office. The balcony was just big enough for a single chair and a potted plant. I did not need more. 32 years of accumulation had taught me that more things meant more weight. I wanted to travel light now. I had brought only what mattered. My mother's recipe box, worn at the edges from decades of use. Her pearl earrings, still in the velvet case she had kept them in. Photographs of the children. But none of the wedding, none of Richard. My laptop and the folders of documents that had become my weapons. A small collection of books I actually wanted to read. And clothes that fit the woman I was becoming, not the woman I had been. Everything I owned fit in the back of a rented SUV. It felt like liberation, not loss. That first morning I woke at 6. Old habits. But instead of making breakfast for someone else, I made coffee for myself. I sat by the window in my small living room and watched the city wake up. No one to cook for, no schedule to keep, no performance required. For the first time in 32 years, I had no one to take care of but myself. The silence was not lonely. It was peaceful. I looked at my phone calendar. Today's date was circled in red. Letter sent, Parker Holdings. Daniel had mailed the non-renewal notice yesterday. By now it would be sitting in the mailbox at 4500 South Tryon Street. Richard was about to have a very bad day, and he did not even know it yet. While I was settling into my new life, Richard was celebrating his victory. Nathan had shared updates before leaving the company, and the picture he painted was almost too perfect to believe. Kristen had moved into the house within a week of the divorce being finalized. She redecorated immediately, erasing every trace of my presence room by room. New furniture, new colors, new energy. According to Nathan, she threw out everything that reminded her of me. She wanted a fresh start. My fresh start cost $20,000. Hers apparently cost my entire life. Richard was spending money like he had won the lottery. Dinner parties with the friends who had chosen his side. Social media posts about new beginnings and living his best life. Golf weekends, expensive bottles of wine, weeknight dinners at La Belle Étoile with Kristen on his arm. He believed he had everything. He did not realize he had inherited bankruptcy. But behind the celebration, the cracks were already forming. Nathan had reported what he saw before leaving. 2 major clients had delayed projects, citing concerns about the company's stability. A supplier had put Parker Construction on credit hold, demanding cash payment for future orders. The line of credit was now 93% maxed out. Payroll had been late by 2 days the previous week, the first time that had ever happened. When Nathan asked about it, Richard dismissed his concerns. Temporary cash flow issues, nothing to worry about, but everything was worth worrying about. The sinking ship was taking on water, and the captain was too busy celebrating to notice. Kristen had become more than Richard's mistress. She was now attending every meeting, making decisions that used to be Richard's alone. Employees whispered about favoritism and corners being cut. The office culture had shifted, becoming tense and uncertain. Nathan described it as watching a building with a cracked foundation. Everyone could see it was unstable, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Nathan's last day at Parker Construction had been 3 days before I moved into my apartment. He gave 2 weeks' notice, professional and clean, no drama. Richard took it personally. "You are abandoning me," Richard had said. "After everything I built for you." Nathan's response was simple and devastating. "You built it for yourself, Dad. I am building my own life now." He came to see me the evening after his last day, the first visitor to my new home. He brought flowers, yellow roses, my favorite. The apartment was still half empty, boxes stacked against walls. But Nathan looked around and smiled. "The place looks good, Mom. It looks like you." "It is small," I said. "It is free. That is what matters." We talked about Richard, carefully, without cruelty. Nathan was sad, not angry. He kept thinking about who his father used to be, or who he thought his father was. "Maybe he was always like this," Nathan said, "and I just did not see it." "People do not change overnight," I told him gently. "They just stop hiding." Before he left, Nathan handed me a folded piece of paper. His resignation letter. He had kept a copy. "Dad is going to blame someone when it all falls apart," he said. "I want documentation that it was not me. My son had learned from me. Documentation, evidence, protection." That same morning, the mail arrived at Parker Construction's office. Among the bills and advertisements was one official envelope. Return address, Parker Holdings, LLC. Richard's secretary placed it on his desk, unopened. He probably would not open it until afternoon. He always saved the boring mail for later. This time, boring was going to ruin his week. Richard finally opened the envelope around 4:30 that afternoon. I know this because Daniel's assistant was monitoring the property management phone line, waiting for the call that was certain to come. The letter was simple. 1-page, formal letterhead. Non-renewal of commercial lease, 4500 South Tryon Street. Dear tenant, please be advised that your current lease agreement will not be renewed upon expiration. You are required to vacate the premises within 60 days of lease expiration, as per the terms of your agreement. Signed, Property Management, Parker Holdings, LLC. Richard's first reaction was confusion. There must be some mistake. He called the number on the letterhead, and a professional voice answered. "Parker Holdings, Property Management." "How may I help you?" he demanded to speak to the owner. The response was polite but immovable. "I am sorry, sir. The owner is not available for calls. All communications must be in writing." Richard's voice grew louder. "I have been a tenant in that building for 12 years. You cannot just non-renew without explanation." "The terms of non-renewal are at the owner's discretion," the voice explained. "You have 60 days from lease expiration. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Richard hung up, furious. He pulled up public records, searched for Parker Holdings, LLC. The North Carolina Secretary of State database showed the registered agent as Whitmore Legal Services. The name meant nothing to him at first. Then it started to seem familiar. Whitmore. Where had he heard that name? He could not find the owner's name. LLCs in North Carolina did not require public disclosure of members. The company was a locked box, and he did not have the key. Richard called Harold Briggs. "I need you to find out who owns Parker Holdings, LLC. They are trying to kick me out of my office." Harold agreed to investigate, but his parting comment carried a note of unease. "Parker Holdings. Interesting name. Almost like someone is making a point." Richard did not catch the implication. Not yet. That evening, Daniel called me with an update. The letter was delivered and signed for. Richard received it personally. He called the property management line and got nowhere, just as we planned. Harold Briggs is now investigating. He will find the LLC but not the owner, at least not easily. "He is going to try to negotiate," Daniel continued. "He is going to try to find the owner. He is going to try everything. And when he finds out it is me, then he will understand what he actually lost." After hanging up, I made myself dinner. Simple pasta, a glass of wine, music playing softly from my phone. I ate at my small table by the window, city lights beginning to twinkle in the darkness below. Richard was panicking right now. I could picture it. The rage, the phone calls, the denial. And here I was eating pasta and listening to jazz. The contrast was almost too perfect. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Parker, this is Harold Briggs. We need to talk about a property matter. Please call me at your earliest convenience." I smiled and set the phone down. I did not respond. Harold wanted answers. He would not get them. Not yet. Not until Richard was standing at my door, realizing that the woman he had discarded was the one holding the keys to his entire business. The first domino had fallen. Now I would watch the rest follow. One by one, everything Richard had built on lies and arrogance would collapse. And I would be here, in my quiet apartment, finally at peace. Finally free. Finally in control. 10 days passed after Richard received the non-renewal letter. 10 days of watching him scramble through second-hand reports and careful observation. Daniel kept me informed of Harold Briggs's investigation. Nathan, though no longer at the company, still heard things through former colleagues who trusted him more than they trusted his father. And I waited, patient as I had always been, knowing the revelation was coming. Richard had tried everything. He called the property management number daily, receiving the same polite refusal each time. He sent certified letters demanding a meeting with the owner, but they were returned unopened. Harold filed formal requests for owner information, but the LLC privacy protections held firm. He even tracked down the previous building owner's estate, hoping someone there would know who had purchased the mortgage note. They knew nothing. Every door Richard tried was locked. Every wall he hit was me. Harold Briggs was thorough, expensive, but thorough. He traced Parker Holdings LLC through multiple layers, following the paper trail with the dogged persistence that made him worth $400 an hour. Registered agent, Whitmore Legal Services. Formation date, 5 years ago. Business address, a post office box in Gastonia. But North Carolina LLCs did not require public disclosure of members. The company was a fortress, and Harold could not find the gate. Then he found it. The connection came through property records. The building's mortgage note had been purchased 5 years ago by Parker Holdings LLC. The funds had been traced back to a bank account in Gastonia, and the account holder, listed on the original wire transfer, was a name Harold finally recognized. Evelyn Marie Ellis. My maiden name. The name I had used to open the account after my mother died. The name that connected me to an inheritance Richard had dismissed as insignificant 8 years ago. Daniel called me on a Friday afternoon, 3.5 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Harold just informed Richard. He knows. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. I had been waiting for this moment for 5 years. What did he say? Daniel paused. Apparently he did not believe it at first. He told Harold it was impossible, that you did not have any money, that you could not have done something like this. I smiled. Of course he did not believe it. The phone call came an hour later. Richard's name on my screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello, Richard. My voice was calm, pleasant even, not cold, not angry, just neutral. The voice of a woman who had nothing left to prove. His voice was hoarse, stripped of the confidence I had heard for 32 years. You own the building, yes, 1 word, no explanation, no apology, no gloating, just confirmation of what he had finally discovered. How? When? Why did you not? He could not finish a sentence. The questions tumbled over each other, none of them fully formed. I purchased the mortgage note 5 years ago with my mother's inheritance, I said patiently. You never asked about my mother's money after the estate was settled. You assumed it was insignificant. You lied to me. I told you the house in Gastonia sold for $40,000. That was true. I never said that was all there was. Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, trying to process what I was telling him. 5 years. I had owned the foundation of his business for 5 years. Every month he paid rent, he had been paying me. Every decision he made in that office, he made on property I controlled. And he never knew, never suspected, never asked. Richard shifted tactics. Desperation replaced anger in his voice. Evelyn, we can work something out. I will pay more rent. I will sign a longer lease. Name your terms. The decision has been made, Richard. The lease will not be renewed. You cannot do this. This is my business, my life's work. I know. You told me that often enough. You just never considered that your life's work was standing on my foundation. His voice cracked. "Evelyn, please, after 32 years. I interrupted him. Something I had never done during our marriage. After 32 years, you sat me down at our kitchen table and told me you wanted everything. You got exactly what you asked for, Richard. Everything you thought you wanted." I let the words settle. "You have 50 days. I suggest you start looking for a new location." I hung up before he could respond. The silence in my apartment was profound. I set the phone down on the table and looked out the window at the Charlotte skyline. Somewhere across the city, Richard was staring at his phone, listening to the dial tone, trying to understand what had just happened. For the first time in his life, Richard Parker had no idea what to do. Daniel called that evening to check on me. "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment. I feel free. Like I have been holding my breath for 5 years, and I finally exhaled. He laughed softly. "That is the best revenge. Not anger. Peace." Richard sat at his desk that afternoon, phone still in hand, the reality of his situation slowly sinking in. 50 days. How do you move an entire construction operation in 50 days? The equipment alone would take weeks to relocate. Finding new commercial space in Charlotte's tight market could take months of searching, negotiations, deposits. He pulled up his finances on the computer. The numbers told a story he had been refusing to read. Line of credit at 93% capacity. Savings depleted by divorce celebrations and Kristen's redecorating projects. 2 major clients threatening to cancel. The company was not struggling, it was hemorrhaging. He could not afford to move. He could not afford to stay. He could not afford anything. Kristen arrived at the office around 5. She had been at the spa, a new weekly ritual since moving into the house. New dress, new jewelry, nails freshly done, all of it paid for with money Richard was rapidly running out of. "Hey, babe, you look terrible. What is wrong?" Richard explained the situation, the building, Evelyn, the eviction. He watched her face as she processed the information. Confusion first. Wait, she owns the building? Then disbelief. How is that possible? Then calculation. Her eyes flickered to her purse, her phone. Mental arithmetic happening behind her carefully made-up face. And finally, concern. But not for him. So what does this mean for the company? For us? Richard heard the pause before us. She was already calculating her exit. He just did not know it yet. That evening, I sat on my small balcony, watching the sun set over Charlotte. Orange and pink painted the skyline, the last light of day fading into purple dusk. A glass of wine in my hand, my mother's recipe box visible through the window on my kitchen shelf. I thought I would feel victorious. I did not. I felt empty. The kind of empty that comes after carrying something heavy for a very long time and finally setting it down. Relief, not triumph. Peace, not joy. My phone buzzed, a text from Nathan. "Mom, Dad called me. He knows about the building. He is losing it." I typed my reply. "I know, I just spoke with him. How are you?" "I am okay. Actually, I am good. I am really good." 3 dots appeared as he typed. Then his response arrived. "I am proud of you, Mom." 3 words. The 3 words I had waited 32 years to hear from someone who meant them. Before bed, I opened my laptop and checked the local news. A headline caught my eye immediately. "Local construction firm under investigation for financial irregularities." The article mentioned an anonymous tip about misappropriated funds, shell companies, and possible tax fraud. The company named was Parker Construction Services. The shell company mentioned was Tryon Ventures LLC. I had not sent that tip. But someone had. Someone who knew where the evidence was buried. I thought of Nathan's resignation letter, the USB drive he had given me, all the documentation he had quietly collected before walking away. The dominoes were falling faster now. Richard had lost his wife. He was about to lose his office. And now, he might lose his company entirely. I closed the laptop and looked out at the city lights. The woman Richard had thrown away like garbage was sitting in her quiet apartment, watching everything he valued burn. Not with joy, not with triumph, just with the deep, settled peace of someone who had finally, after 32 years, won. 2 weeks after Richard learned the truth about the building, his world was falling apart faster than anyone had predicted. I heard the updates through Daniel, through Nathan, through the silence that said everything words could not. I had planned for the building. I had not planned for everything else. But when one pillar falls, the others follow. The anonymous tip had triggered a formal investigation. State investigators were now examining Parker Construction's finances with the kind of attention Richard had spent years avoiding. Tryon Ventures LLC was a primary focus. The shell company, the payments that had no corresponding services, the cabin in Blowing Rock purchased with company funds. Kristen's name was attached to documents she could not explain away. They were not just looking at tax issues anymore. They were looking at fraud, misappropriation of company funds. If the investigation went federal, Richard was facing serious charges. Word spread through Charlotte's construction community the way it always does in tight-knit industries. Whispers became rumors, rumors became concerns. 2 major clients terminated their contracts, citing worries about company stability. 3 more put projects on hold pending further review. Vendors who had extended credit for years suddenly demanded cash payment up front. No more net 30 terms, no more trust. Richard had spent 30 years building a reputation. It took 2 weeks to destroy it. The biggest blow came on a Tuesday morning. Richard's bank called about the mortgage on the house at Rosewood Lane. The second mortgage he had taken out years ago, the one I had discovered in Nathan's files. Payments were 2 months behind. The bank's message was simple and devastating. Bring the account current within 30 days or face foreclosure proceedings. The house he had fought so hard to take from me was now taking everything from him. Kristen's departure happened 3 weeks after Richard learned about the building. I was not there to witness it, but Nathan heard about it from a neighbor who saw the whole thing unfold. 11 o'clock at night, Kristen loading suitcases into her car. Richard in the driveway in his bathrobe, pleading with her not to leave. "After everything I gave up for you," he said. "After everything I lost." Her response was brutal in its honesty. "You did not give up anything for me, Richard. You gave up everything for yourself. I was just convenient." She drove away that night. Some said Atlanta. Others heard she had family in Florida. She did not look back. What she left behind was the cabin in Blowing Rock, still registered to Tryon Ventures LLC, still in her name. Evidence she could not escape no matter how far she ran. She had come for the money and the lifestyle. When both disappeared, so did she. I almost felt sorry for Richard. Almost. The house on Rosewood Lane was empty now. Richard alone in 4 bedrooms, surrounded by furniture Kristen had chosen to erase my presence. The house I had decorated and maintained for 20 years, redecorated by his mistress, now belonging to neither of us. Just Richard and the debt and the silence. He had wanted everything. Now everything was exactly what he had, and nothing more. The doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon, late November. I was reading by the window in my small apartment, afternoon light soft and golden on the pages. I was not expecting anyone. Nathan had texted earlier that he was settling into his new job in Raleigh. Daniel had no meetings scheduled. I looked through the peephole and saw Richard. I barely recognized him. The confident businessman who had sat across from me at our kitchen table 2 months ago was gone. In his place stood a man who looked 10 years older. Wrinkled shirt, stubble on his jaw, dark circles carved deep under his eyes. His shoulders slumped like he was carrying something too heavy to bear. This was the man I had loved for 32 years. This was the man who had thrown me away like garbage, and now he was at my door, looking like garbage himself. I opened the door but did not step aside. I stood in the doorway, blocking entry. "Evelyn, please, we need to talk." "There is nothing left to talk about, Richard. Please, just 5 minutes. I am begging you." I had never heard Richard beg for anything in 32 years of marriage. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. 5 minutes. He entered and looked around the small apartment. I watched him take it in. The modest furniture, the tiny kitchen, the single window with its view of the city. I could read his thoughts. This is what she gave up everything for? He did not understand. He never would. Evelyn, I need you to reconsider. The building, the lease. I know I do not deserve it, but you are right. You do not deserve it. His desperation deepened. I will lose everything. The company, the house, all of it. Is that what you want? I looked at him. Really looked. This man I had shared a bed with, raised children with, built a life with. This man who had discarded me without a second thought. What I want, Richard, is what I have always wanted. To be seen, to be valued, to be treated like I mattered. I paused, letting the words settle between us. You had 32 years to give me that. You chose not to. So I gave it to myself. His eyes grew wet. Not quite tears, but close. I made mistakes. I know that now. But this is destroying me. You said you wanted everything except our son. I gave you exactly what you asked for. You just did not realize that everything included the consequences. I walked to the door and opened it. Goodbye, Richard. I hope you find what you are looking for. But you will not find it here. He stood slowly, walked past me, stopped at the threshold. One last question, asked in a voice I had never heard from him before, small, broken. Do you hate me? I considered the question, searched myself for the answer. No, I do not hate you. I just do not love you anymore. And honestly, Richard, that is worse for you. I closed the door. In the days that followed, the dominoes continued to fall. Gloria Parker had gone silent. No more phone calls, no more lectures about dignity and doing the right thing. Nathan reported that she was too embarrassed to show her face at church. Everyone in their social circle knew what had happened. The divorce, the mistress, the business collapse, the eviction. Gloria's perfect son was a public failure. She had told me Richard always wins. I wondered if she still believed that. Sandra Mitchell tried calling 3 times that week. I saw her name on the screen each time and let it ring through to voicemail. She left one message. Evelyn, please, I am so sorry. I did not know how bad things were with Richard. I thought I was helping. Please call me back. I deleted it without responding. Some bridges do not get rebuilt. Some betrayals do not get forgiven. Sandra had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Richard listed the house on Rosewood Lane for sale. The for sale sign went up in the front yard, the yard I had planted and maintained and loved for 20 years. The asking price was far below what we had paid. Daniel's assessment was grim. He is underwater. Second mortgage plus the original. He will be lucky to break even. The house Richard had fought so hard to keep was now the anchor dragging him under. There was poetry in that, bitter and true. That evening, a text arrived from an unexpected source. Meredith, Mom. I need to talk to you. Can I come visit this weekend? Please. I stared at the message for a long time. My daughter, my firstborn, the one who had chosen Richard's side without hearing mine, the one who had accused me of giving up without understanding what I was really doing. She was reaching out. Finally. I typed my reply after a long pause. Yes, come Saturday afternoon. I did not know what Meredith wanted. Reconciliation, accusation, explanation. But I knew I had to give her the chance. That is what mothers do. That night I sat by my window and took stock of everything that had happened. Richard was broken, alone, facing bankruptcy and possible prosecution. Kristen had fled, her name attached to fraud she could not escape. Gloria was humiliated into silence. Sandra was living with unanswered calls and regret. The house was drowning its new owner. The building was still mine, still generating the income that would support my future. And me? I was free, at peace, beginning again. Nathan called before I went to bed. "Mom, I heard about Dad coming to see you. Are you okay?" "I am okay, sweetheart. Better than okay." "What happens now?" "Now we move forward. All of us." I thought about Meredith's text after we hung up. My daughter was reaching out. Not to Richard, to me. The family Richard had tried to build without me was falling apart. But maybe, just maybe, there was a different family waiting to be rebuilt. Not the one I had lost. Something new. Something better. I thought of my mother's words, spoken so many years ago. A woman who waits, wins. I had waited. I had won. But the real victory was not Richard's defeat. It was the life I was about to build, the relationships I could still heal, the woman I could finally become. Saturday, Meredith would come. And perhaps for the first time in years, my daughter and I would really see each other. The apartment was ready. Tea set for two on the small table by the window. Chamomile, Meredith's favorite since she was a little girl. Saturday afternoon light filled the room, soft and golden. I had faced Richard without fear, but waiting for my daughter made my hands tremble. The doorbell rang at 2:15, 15 minutes late. I took a breath, smoothed my blouse, and opened the door. Meredith stood in the hallway looking uncertain. 29 years old, but in that moment she looked like the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. She stepped inside and looked around the small apartment. Her eyes moved from the modest furniture to the city view to the photographs on the shelf. Pictures of her and Nathan. Pictures of my mother Margaret. No pictures of Richard. "It is smaller than I expected," she said quietly. "It is exactly the right size for me." We sat across from each other at the small table. Tea poured but untouched. Silence stretched between us. 32 years of history compressed into a single moment. I waited. Let her find her words. "Mom, I came to apologize. I stayed quiet. Let her speak. I believed Dad. Everything he said about you, about the marriage, about why it ended. I believed him without asking you, without listening." Her voice cracked. "I am so sorry." I reached across the table and took her hand. What changed? Tears formed in her eyes. I saw who he really is, what he did to you, to the company, to everyone. Grandma Gloria will not even take my calls now because she is too humiliated. And Dad. She paused, struggling with the words. "Dad called me last week asking for money, his own daughter. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not ask about my life or my job or anything, just money." Richard had finally shown Meredith what I had seen for years, not through my words, through his actions. Some lessons cannot be taught, they have to be witnessed. I could have said I told you so. I could have listed every grievance, every sacrifice, every silent wound I had carried for decades. Instead, I chose differently. You do not need to apologize for believing your father. He is your father. You were supposed to trust him. Meredith asked to know everything. The truth, finally. So I told her. The years of being invisible. The affair with Kristen. The inheritance from my mother, kept secret for 8 years. The building, purchased 5 years ago with money Richard never knew existed. The plan, executed with patience most people cannot imagine. I told it without bitterness, without gloating. Just facts, laid bare for my daughter to see. She listened with tears streaming down her face. Not tears of pity, tears of understanding. You planned this for years, and you never told anyone. I could not risk it. And I could not burden you or Nathan with knowledge that might have hurt you. But Nathan knew. At least some of it. Nathan saw things I could not hide. He made his own choices. Meredith set down her untouched tea and looked at me with new eyes. "I spent years thinking you were weak, that you just let things happen to you. I was wrong." She reached for my hand again. "You are the strongest person I know." "I am not strong, sweetheart. I just learned to be patient. And I learned that my worth was not determined by anyone else. Not your father, not society, not even my own children." She squeezed my hand. "What happens now?" With Dad, I mean. With everything. Your father will face the consequences of his choices. That is not my concern anymore. And us? You and me? I smiled. We start over. We build something new, if you want to. Meredith's tears fell freely now, but she was smiling too. I want to. I really want to. 6 months passed. Spring came to Charlotte, dogwood trees blooming pink and white, morning light golden through my apartment windows. I stood on my small balcony, watching the city wake up below. A new season, a new life. The building on South Tryon Street had new tenants now. A tech startup on the ground floor, a law firm on the second, full occupancy and stable income. Daniel had helped me set up proper management. The building that had been my secret weapon was now my foundation. Richard's rent had paid the mortgage for years. Now other people's rent was building my future. Richard had declared bankruptcy in February. The house on Rosewood Lane sold at auction for less than he owed. The investigation into Parker Construction was ongoing, lawyers negotiating, consequences still unfolding. He was living in a rental apartment now, working as a consultant for a competitor. What I heard from people who still saw him was that he looked old, tired, beaten. I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel pity. I felt nothing. He had become a stranger, someone I used to know. That was the cleanest ending I could have asked for. Kristen was facing charges related to Tryon Ventures. Her lawyer was negotiating, trying to minimize the damage. Gloria had moved to Florida to live near her sister, too humiliated to stay in Charlotte. Sandra was still trying to rebuild friendships. I heard she was in therapy, working through whatever guilt she carried. I wished her well. I just did not wish to see her again. Nathan drove down from Raleigh every other weekend. Meredith called twice a week and visited monthly. The three of us had dinner together at my small apartment. Pasta, wine, conversation, laughter. We were not the family we used to be. We were something better. Something built on truth instead of pretense. I had started doing informal consulting. Women going through divorces, helping them understand finances, property, their options. Not legal advice. Just experience. Just wisdom, Daniel referred them. Patricia referred them. Word spread quietly through networks I never knew existed. One afternoon, a woman named Margaret came to see me. 54 years old, married 30 years, husband just asked for divorce. She sat across from me in my small living room, hands shaking, eyes red from crying. I do not know what to do. I do not have anything of my own. He controlled everything. My heart recognized her immediately. This was who I had been years ago, lost, invisible, afraid. I made her tea and sat beside her. The first thing you need to understand is that you are not starting from nothing. You are starting from experience, from strength you do not even know you have yet. She looked up at me. How did you survive it? One day at a time. One decision at a time, and by remembering that my worth was never determined by him. It never was. Did it get better? I smiled. It got so much better, not easier at first, but better. As Margaret stood to leave, she paused at the door. My mother's name was Evelyn, too. She always said the same thing you just told me. That a woman's worth is not determined by a man, the wisdom passes on. Mother to daughter, woman to woman, generation to generation. Your mother was a smart woman, I said. So are you. That evening I sat by my window watching the sunset, orange and pink painting the Charlotte skyline, the last light of day fading into purple dusk. A glass of wine in my hand, my mother's recipe box on the shelf nearby. Earlier that day, I had found something while organizing old papers. A letter I had written to myself years ago, never sent. Written the night I discovered Richard's first lie, 5 years before the divorce. The letter read, Evelyn, if you are reading this, you made it. You survived. Whatever happened, you are still standing. Remember who you are. Remember what Mama said. And never, ever, let anyone make you feel small again. I had forgotten about this letter. But somewhere inside, I had always known it would come to this. I looked at the photograph of my mother on the shelf. Margaret, smiling, strong, independent until her last breath. "Thank you, Mama," I whispered. "For the money, for the wisdom, for believing in me when I forgot to believe in myself." I raised my glass to her photograph. I had spent 32 years being someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's invisible partner. Now I was just Evelyn. And that was enough. That was everything. The sun disappeared behind the buildings. Stars began to appear one by one. I smiled. Not the polite smile I had worn for decades, a real smile. My husband took everything in the divorce, the house, the cars, the business, everything he thought mattered. But he forgot to ask about the one thing I had kept for myself, and that one thing gave me back my whole life. Some people wait for justice. Some people wait for karma. I waited for neither. I simply waited until I was ready. And when I was ready, I took back what was always mine: my freedom, my dignity, and my future. Richard thought the story ended when the divorce papers were signed. He was wrong. That was when my story finally began. If you made it to the end of my story, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that a woman who was told she had nothing could still win everything that mattered. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had to wait for your moment? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories like mine waiting to be told. Stories of women who refused to stay invisible, who played the long game, who got the last word. Click on the next video on your screen. I promise you will not be disappointed. See you in the next story. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.